Hello, this is Harrison Walton, and you are listening to How to Stop Overthinking, a Calm Mind audiobook, provided to you by United Audiobooks. I hope you enjoy my audiobook. Now, let us begin.
Introduction. The mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Robin Sharma. I created this audiobook because I've been where you are. 10 years ago, my brain felt like a hamster wheel spinning at 100 miles per hour with no emergency brake. Every decision, from what to eat for breakfast to major career moves, triggered endless cycles of analysis, second-guessing, and anxiety. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m., replaying conversations from years ago, imagining catastrophic futures, or questioning choices I'd already made. Does this sound familiar? If so, you're in good company. My journey from overthinking to mental freedom wasn't linear or perfect. It came through years of research, professional training, and working with hundreds of clients trapped in similar mental mazes. The breakthroughs I witnessed and experienced personally weren't from exotic techniques or complicated theories. They came from practical, science-based cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT approaches that literally rewire your brain's habitual pathways. The hidden cost of overthinking. Consider James, a brilliant marketing executive who spent 3 weeks drafting and redrafting a simple email to a potential client, or Maya, a loving mother who stayed up nights cataloging all the ways she might be failing her children, or Raj, whose fear of making the wrong career move kept him paralyzed in a job he'd outgrown years ago. These stories represent thousands I've encountered, people whose overthinking robbed them of peace, opportunity, and presence. The tragedy isn't just the anxiety overthinking produces, it's the life unlived while stuck in mental loops. What's fascinating is that most overthinkers believe their excessive analysis is helpful, a form of preparation or thoroughness. Yet, research consistently shows the opposite. Overthinking impairs decision-making, diminishes creativity, and damages well-being. It's like having your brain's alarm system permanently stuck in the on position. Beyond quick fixes and empty platitudes. If you've tried to tackle overthinking before, you've likely encountered advice like, just stop worrying or live in the present. While well-intentioned, such guidance is about as helpful as telling someone with insomnia to just fall asleep. What's missing are the actual mechanisms for change. This audiobook fills that gap. Rather than offering empty platitudes, I've distilled the most effective CBT practices into clear, actionable habits that directly target the cognitive patterns fueling overthinking. Each chapter builds upon the last, creating a comprehensive system for dismantling thought spirals and building healthier mental pathways. The approach is both immediate and enduring. You'll find techniques you can implement today to interrupt active overthinking episodes, alongside deeper practices that gradually transform your brain's default settings over time. Built on science, written for humans. While the strategies in this audiobook are grounded in decades of clinical research, I've worked to present them in language that feels like a conversation with a trusted friend who happens to know a lot about how brains work. The science matters, but what matters more is your ability to apply these principles in your everyday life. I'm deeply grateful to my colleagues who reviewed these methods with me, to my clients who bravely shared their experiences, and to my family who supported me through the creation process, often reminding me when I was overthinking about an audiobook on overthinking. Your path forward. Whether you're listening to this because anxiety has become unbearable, decision-making feels impossible, or you simply want to quiet the constant chatter in your mind, you'll find pathways to relief in the coming chapters. This isn't an audiobook about eliminating thinking. Critical analysis and reflection are valuable human capacities. It's about reclaiming the ability to think clearly and purposefully rather than being trapped in exhausting mental loops that add suffering without insight. The journey ahead won't always be easy. Rewiring neural pathways takes practice and patience. there will be setbacks and challenges, but I can promise you this. With each technique you try, each habit you build, you will be taking back pieces of your mind that overthinking has claimed. Thank you for trusting me with your time and attention. Let's begin the work of freeing your mind from overthinking, not just for moments of relief, but for a lifetime of clearer thinking and greater peace. Reclaim the calm beneath your thoughts. Do you ever feel like your mind just won't stop analyzing every detail, even when you know it's time to let go? I've lived in that restless space too, replaying conversations, predicting outcomes, and trying to think my way into peace. But what I eventually learned is that overthinking doesn't mean your mind is broken. It means your mind is trying to protect you in the only way it knows how. The real transformation begins when you stop fighting your thoughts and start understanding them. By learning how your brain's cognitive patterns and emotional triggers interact, you can rewire your responses and reclaim control of your mental space. That's where clarity, confidence, and calm begin to grow. To help you take that next step, I've collaborated with Books for Growth to create the free What is Your Psychological Archetype quiz. Together, we designed it as a bridge between science and self-understanding, blending evidence-based psychology with intuitive insight. It helps you identify the subconscious patterns that shape your thinking, revealing how to quiet mental noise and return to balance. You deserve a mind that feels clear, steady, and alive in the present. Visit quiz.booksforgrowth.com to get started. That's quiz.books4growth.com. Again, quiz.booksforgrowth.com. Chapter 1. The Overthinking Trap. Distinguishing harm from hyper-vigilance. Are you thinking or just spinning your mental wheels? The human mind is remarkably efficient at creating problems that don't exist. That nagging voice replaying conversations from 3 days ago, calculating 17 possible outcomes of tomorrow's meeting, or convincing you that a simple text message contains hidden disapproval. This isn't productive thinking. It's mental quicksand. The distinction between thoughtful analysis and unproductive ruminations forms the cornerstone of mental wellness, yet remains elusive to many caught in thought cycles they mistake for diligence. Most people believe that extensively analyzing problems demonstrates conscientiousness and intellectual rigor. There's an implicit assumption that more thinking equals better outcomes. We tell ourselves, I'm just being thorough, or I need to consider every possibility. This misconception leads millions to exhaust themselves on mental treadmills, expending tremendous energy while going nowhere. The paradox of overthinking lies in how it masquerades as solution-focused behavior while actually preventing solutions from emerging. What begins as a legitimate reflection transforms into a self-perpetuating cycle that clouds judgment rather than clarifying it. Throughout this chapter, we'll establish clear boundaries between beneficial self-awareness and detrimental overthinking. You'll learn to recognize when you've crossed from productive analysis into counterproductive rumination, that point where additional thinking delivers diminishing returns and begins actively working against you. This distinction isn't merely academic. It's the essential first step in reclaiming your mental bandwidth from thoughts that consume rather than serve you. We'll examine how overthinking silently undermines your quality of life through concrete impacts on your health, relationships, and productivity, from elevated stress hormones that disrupt sleep to the cognitive fog that hampers decision-making. Overthinking extracts a measurable toll that extends far beyond mere mental discomfort. The chronic overthinking that many dismiss as just how my mind works creates tangible consequences that ripple through every aspect of daily life. Understanding these impacts helps transform vague frustration into specific motivation for change. The chapter will also illuminate the common triggers and psychological patterns that initiate and sustain overthinking cycles. Whether stemming from perfectionist tendencies, uncertainty avoidance, or past experiences that trained your brain to remain hypervigilant. Recognizing your personal overthinking patterns provides the foundation for targeted intervention. These patterns aren't random. They follow predictable pathways that, once identified, can be redirected. This exploration serves as our entry point into the broader framework of cognitive behavioral approaches that form the backbone of this audiobook. In subsequent chapters, we'll build on this foundation by introducing specific CBT-based techniques that interrupt thought spirals, exercises that strengthen your ability to redirect attention, and daily practices that gradually rewire neural pathways to favor clarity over chaos. The skills you'll develop aren't just about suppressing thoughts, but transforming your relationship with them. Learning to observe without attaching, question without ruminating, and respond without reactivity. The journey we're beginning isn't about thinking less. It's about thinking better. Within 3 to 6 months of consistent practice with the methods outlined in this audiobook, you can fundamentally alter how your mind processes information and responds to triggers. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but neither does it require years of intensive therapy. With deliberate practice and patience, the mind that currently feels like an unreliable ally can become your most valuable asset. Let's begin by understanding exactly what we're working with, the subtle but crucial difference between productive thought and the overthinking trap. When the mind becomes a wheel that turns and turns. Martin sat at his kitchen table, staring into a mug of coffee that had gone cold. Outside, the November rain tapped against the window with gentle persistence. The sound should have soothed him. Instead, it marked time passing while he remained frozen in thought. I should have said something different in that meeting, he thought. The morning status update had ended 3 hours ago, but his mind kept returning to it like a dog worrying about a bone. He had presented the quarterly numbers. They were good numbers. His boss had nodded. His colleagues had asked appropriate questions. Yet he kept replaying his responses, searching for flaws, constructing alternate versions of the conversation. The refrigerator hummed. Martin rose and pulled open the door, the cold air washing over his face. He stared at the contents without seeing them. The deadline for the Harrington proposal loomed tomorrow, but he had spent the entire morning dissecting a meeting that had gone perfectly well. His fingers drummed against the refrigerator door. He closed it without taking anything out and returned to his laptop. The cursor blinked on the empty document. Martin typed a sentence, deleted it, typed another, and deleted that too. He had outlined the proposal 3 different ways already. Each approach seemed simultaneously promising and deeply flawed. He kept imagining the committee's reactions, constructing elaborate scenarios of their questions, their doubts. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. How's it going? Still overthinking it? He smiled grimly. She knew him too well. The sun broke through the clouds momentarily, casting a bright rectangle across his table. Martin watched the light illuminate the dust particles in the air, drifting aimlessly, unlike his thoughts, which moved in tight, exhausting circles. Just submit what you have, he told himself. It's thorough, it's good. But what if he had missed something? What if there was a better approach he hadn't considered? What if his analysis of the market factors was incomplete? What if his recommendations were obvious, pedestrian? The light retreated as clouds reclaimed the sky. The rain intensified, drumming harder against the glass. Martin pulled up his notes again. He would review them one more time. Just one more time. He glanced at the clock. 3 hours had passed since he sat down to write. His coffee cup remained full, now entirely cold. The blank document stared back at him. The cat jumped onto the table, knocking a stack of papers to the floor. Martin startled, then bent to retrieve them. As he gathered the scattered sheets, he found himself looking at notes from 6 months ago, problems he'd worried about over endlessly that now seemed trivial, solved, forgotten. He straightened the papers and set them aside. His phone buzzed again. The deadline was now 18 hours away, and he had produced nothing but anxiety. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the window, indifferent to his paralysis. How many opportunities had slipped through his fingers while he stood frozen at the crossroads of decision, mapping every possible route, but taking none. When self-awareness becomes self-sabotage, we all want to be thoughtful people who make good decisions. Taking time to reflect on our choices, analyze situations, and consider consequences is part of being responsible. This kind of mindful consideration helps us navigate life's challenges with clarity and purpose. Healthy self-awareness involves acknowledging your thoughts and feelings without judgment, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and using this information to guide your actions in constructive ways. It's like checking your map before starting a journey, a practical tool that helps you reach your destination efficiently. But there's a tipping point where healthy reflection transforms into something harmful. Overthinking occurs when you can't stop analyzing a thought, situation, or feeling. You become stuck in a loop of repetitive thoughts that don't lead to new insights or solutions. The same concerns play on repeat in your mind, like a broken record that can't move forward. Hours can pass while you're trapped in these mental cycles, and rather than feeling clarity, you experience increasing confusion and doubt. Consider the difference between a car's side view mirror and a hall of mirrors. A side view mirror serves a clear purpose. It provides necessary information that helps you drive safely. You glance at it when needed, get the information you require, and continue driving. This is healthy self-awareness. Overthinking, however, resembles walking into a hall of mirrors, where your reflection is distorted and multiplied endlessly. You become disoriented, unable to distinguish what's real, and find yourself walking in circles with no exit in sight. The brain's default mode network, DMN, plays a significant role in both reflection and rumination. When functioning optimally, this network helps us process experiences, solve problems, and plan for the future. However, research shows that in people who struggle with overthinking, the DMN becomes overactive, particularly in areas associated with self-referential thinking. This neurological pattern explains why overthinking often feels involuntary and difficult to control. The brain gets stuck in a pattern of recursive thinking that serves no productive purpose. Productive reflection is time-bound and solution-oriented. You might spend 30 minutes reviewing a difficult conversation, identify what went wrong, decide how to handle similar situations differently next time, and then move on. Overthinking, by contrast, knows no boundaries. You might spend hours, days, or even weeks revisiting the same conversation without gaining new insights. The content becomes increasingly negative, focusing on self-criticism or imagined catastrophes rather than constructive solutions. At the same time, reflection energizes you with clarity and direction. Overthinking leaves you mentally exhausted and emotionally drained. Many people mistake overthinking for thoroughness. They believe that analyzing a situation from every possible angle demonstrates intelligence and responsibility. This misconception keeps them trapped in unproductive thought patterns. They don't realize that beyond a certain point, additional analysis doesn't improve outcomes. It simply creates paralysis. Effective decision-making requires balancing thoughtful consideration with decisive action, knowing when you have enough information to move forward. The fundamental difference between healthy reflection and harmful overthinking lies in its result. Reflection leads to clarity and action, while overthinking leads to confusion and stagnation. The hidden toll of overthinking. The constant whirl of overthinking takes a significant physical toll on your body. When caught in cycles of repetitive, worry-filled thoughts, your brain interprets this as a threat, triggering your body's stress response. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system, preparing you for a danger that exists only in your mind. Research published in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology demonstrates that chronic overthinkers experience higher rates of cardiovascular issues, compromised immune function, and digestive problems. These stress hormones, meant for short-term emergency situations, cause harm when continuously present in your bloodstream over weeks, months, or years. Your productivity suffers tremendously when overthinking takes hold. Tasks that should take minutes stretch into hours as you second-guess each decision and worry about potential mistakes. A 2018 study from the University of California found that overthinking reduced problem-solving abilities by up to 30% in test subjects. Consider how many hours you've lost staring at a blank document, unable to write the first sentence because you're too concerned about getting it perfect, or how many times you've recognized your to-do list instead of actually completing the tasks. Overthinking creates a false sense of activity while preventing real progress. Think of your mental energy as a smartphone battery. Every decision you make, every problem you solve, depletes this battery a little bit. When you overthink, you're running dozens of unnecessary background apps that drain your battery at an alarming rate. By midday, you're operating at 20% capacity, struggling to perform even basic functions. Meanwhile, the person who processes thoughts efficiently and moves forward preserves their mental battery for tasks that truly matter. They finish the day with energy to spare, while you're completely depleted. Relationships often bear the brunt of overthinking patterns. When you're constantly analyzing every interaction, searching for hidden meanings in casual comments, or rehearsing conversations that may never happen, an authentic connection becomes impossible. Partners, friends, and family members sense your mental absence, even when you're physically present. They feel scrutinized rather than accepted, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering another spiral of analysis. A study from the University of Buffalo found that relationships involving at least one chronic overthinker had significantly lower satisfaction rates and higher conflict than relationships without this dynamic. Overthinking robs you of life's simple pleasures. When you're continuously dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, you miss the only moment you can actually experience, the present. The sunset goes unnoticed, the laughter of your child becomes background noise, and the taste of your meal is forgotten as your mind chews on problems instead. This constant disconnection from present experience is perhaps the cruelest cost of overthinking, as it systematically removes joy from your life one moment at a time. The emotional impact is equally devastating. Overthinking is strongly correlated with both anxiety and depression. When you repeatedly focus on negative possibilities or past mistakes, you train your brain to see threats everywhere. A 2019 meta-analysis in the Journal of Affective Disorders found that rumination, a common form of overthinking, was one of the strongest predictors of depression development and relapse. The more you overthink, the more your emotional baseline shifts towards negativity, creating a self-reinforcing cycle that's difficult to break. Your decision-making ability deteriorates significantly under the influence of overthinking. Psychologists have identified a phenomenon called analysis paralysis, where excessive consideration of options actually prevents you from making any choice at all. In a fascinating experiment at Columbia University, researchers found that shoppers presented with 24 jam options were less likely to purchase any jam than those who saw only 6 options. The overwhelm created by too many choices, or in the case of overthinking, too many potential outcomes to analyze, freezes your ability to act decisively. Overthinking frequently manifests as perfectionism, setting impossible standards that guarantee failure. You delay starting projects until conditions are ideal, or you revise work endlessly, never feeling it's good enough to share. This perfectionism doesn't lead to better outcomes. It leads to missed opportunities, abandoned projects, and chronic dissatisfaction. The irony is painful. In trying to avoid mistakes through excessive analysis, you make the biggest mistake of all, never fully engaging with your life and potential. What might your life look like if you reclaimed all the hours spent overthinking and invested them in meaningful action instead? Understanding the overthinking trigger points. Uncertainty stands as one of the most powerful triggers for overthinking. The human brain craves certainty and predictability. It's wired to seek patterns and create order from chaos. When faced with ambiguous situations or unclear outcomes, many people respond by mentally rehearsing every possible scenario. A job interview, a medical test result, or waiting to hear back after a first date can all activate this response. The brain mistakenly believes that if it considers every possibility, it can somehow prepare for or control the outcome. This illusion of control temporarily soothes anxiety, which reinforces the overthinking habit, even though it rarely affects the actual result. Research in cognitive psychology reveals that particular personality traits make some individuals more susceptible to overthinking patterns. People high in neuroticism, characterized by emotional sensitivity and reactivity, often have brains that are more responsive to potential threats. This heightened alertness makes them more likely to engage in protective overthinking. Similarly, those with perfectionist tendencies frequently ruminate on mistakes and perceive flaws, attempting to mentally solve unsolvable problems. Recognizing these predispositions isn't about making excuses, but understanding the terrain of your mind so you can navigate it more effectively. Life transitions and major changes create fertile ground for overthinking to flourish, whether it's starting a new job, ending a relationship, moving to a different city, or adjusting to an empty nest. Periods of transformation disrupt our mental models of how life works. The brain, uncomfortable with this disruption, works overtime, trying to create new maps and predict what comes next. During these transitions, overthinking can feel like a flashlight in the dark. Not very powerful, but offering some sense of direction when you're feeling lost. Unfortunately, this flashlight often illuminates imaginary dangers rather than lighting a clear path forward. Think of your thought patterns like water flowing down a hillside. Over time, the water carves deeper and deeper channels in the earth. Eventually, whenever rain falls, the water automatically follows these established paths. This is how neural pathways develop in your brain. Each time you respond to a trigger with overthinking, you deepen that channel, making it more likely you'll follow the same route next time. This explains why you can find yourself suddenly deep in an overthinking spiral without consciously choosing to go there. Your thoughts simply followed the path of least resistance. Past traumas and difficult experiences significantly shape overthinking patterns. When you've been hurt, blindsided, or made a serious mistake with painful consequences, your brain develops a hyper-vigilance meant to prevent similar pain in the future. If a previous relationship ended with betrayal, for instance, you might obsessively analyze your current partner's words and actions, looking for signs of potential disloyalty. This protective mechanism, while understandable, often creates the very problems it's trying to prevent. As excessive vigilance damages trust and intimacy, the brain hasn't updated its threat assessment to match your current reality. Cultural and social factors play an underappreciated role in fueling overthinking. We live in a society that often equates busyness with importance and productivity. The constant message that you should always be doing more, achieving more, and striving for perfection creates a breeding ground for overthinking. Social media amplifies this by presenting curated versions of others' lives, prompting harmful comparisons and rumination about why your life doesn't measure up. Additionally, certain family dynamics and educational environments reward exhaustive analysis while punishing mistakes, inadvertently teaching children that overthinking is a virtue rather than a liability. Understanding these triggers and patterns is the crucial first step toward freedom from overthinking. By recognizing when, why, and how your mind gets caught in these loops, you gain the awareness needed to interrupt them before they consume your mental energy. The path from harmful overthinking back to helpful reflection requires this foundational knowledge alongside practical strategies for redirecting your thoughts, challenging unproductive mental habits, and building healthier ways of processing life's inevitable challenges and uncertainties. In this chapter, we've pulled back the curtain on overthinking, that persistent mental loop that masquerades as productive analysis but actually undermines your well-being and effectiveness. By now, you understand the crucial distinction between self-awareness that guides meaningful action and the detrimental rumination that keeps you stuck. The impacts of overthinking extend far beyond momentary discomfort. When left unchecked, this habit silently erodes your mental health, strains relationships, and sabotages productivity. Most importantly, you now recognize that overthinking isn't an inherent personality trait, but rather a learned response to specific triggers, meaning it can be unlearned with consistent practice. The Thought Detective Protocol: Uncovering Your Overthinking Patterns. The first step toward breaking free from overthinking begins with awareness. This structured approach helps you identify precisely when your overthinking shifts from helpful to harmful. 1. Create a dedicated thought journal. Set aside 5 minutes each day for 1 week to record overwhelming thought patterns. Include timestamps and detailed descriptions of what's running through your mind. Time: 5 minutes daily. 2. Conduct a pattern analysis. After 7 days, review your entries with fresh eyes. Look for recurring triggers, situations, or times of day when overthinking typically strikes. What themes emerge? Time: 30 minutes. 3. Separate the wheat from the chaff. Draw a line down the middle of a fresh page. Label one side beneficial and the other detrimental. Sort your documented thought patterns accordingly. Beneficial thoughts lead to clarity or action. Detrimental ones create loops without resolution. Time: 20 minutes. 4. Question your detrimental patterns. For each harmful thought pattern, ask yourself, what triggered this cycle? What evidence contradicts my concerns? What would I tell a friend with the same worry? What's a more balanced perspective? Time: 2 to 3 minutes per thought pattern. 5. Develop physical interruptions. Identify a simple physical activity, such as standing up, stretching, or taking 3 deep breaths that you can use to break an overthinking loop when you catch yourself in one. Time: immediate intervention, 30 to 60 seconds. 7. Extract the lesson. After interrupting an overthinking cycle, briefly note what you learned. Was there any genuine insight hidden within the overthinking? Time: 1 to 2 minutes. 7. Track your progress. Weekly. Review how often you're catching yourself before deep overthinking takes hold. Note situations where you successfully redirected your thoughts. Time: 10 minutes weekly. This protocol isn't about perfection. It's about progress. With practice, you'll develop an internal alarm system that alerts you when you're crossing from helpful reflection into the overthinking zone. As you close this chapter, remember that recognizing overthinking is half the battle. The mental patterns you've developed over the years won't disappear overnight, but you've taken the crucial first step: awareness. You now have concrete tools to identify when your thoughts have crossed from productive to problematic. In the chapters ahead, we'll build on this foundation. You'll discover powerful cognitive behavioral techniques to challenge overthinking in the moment, develop sustainable habits that prevent mental loops before they start, and create a personalized action plan that works specifically for your thought patterns. The journey from overthinking to balanced thinking isn't always straightforward, but it's one that thousands have successfully navigated. Your brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to form new connections and patterns, means you're fully capable of rewiring the thought processes that have kept you stuck. Trust the process, be patient with yourself, and remember that each time you catch yourself overthinking, it's not a failure, it's a victory of awareness and an opportunity to practice the skills you're developing. Your clearer, calmer mind awaits. Reclaim calm by understanding your emotions. If you've ever felt like your thoughts are racing ahead of your emotions, analyzing every word, every look, every possible outcome, you're not alone. Overthinking often begins as an attempt to protect ourselves from uncomfortable feelings. But when we try to think our way out of emotion, we lose touch with what those feelings are actually trying to tell us. I know that cycle well. For years, I believed that if I could just think better, I'd finally stop feeling anxious. But the truth I discovered, and what I teach now, is that freedom from overthinking doesn't come from silencing emotion. It comes from understanding it. When we can name what we feel and notice how emotion shapes our thoughts, we regain control of our responses instead of being controlled by them. Because this connection between thought and emotion is so essential, I wanted to offer you something that goes deeper into it. I've partnered with Books for Growth to share a free companion ebook, Emotional Intelligence in Social Settings. This guide is filled with practical insights on recognizing emotional cues, both in yourself and others, so you can stay centered, communicate more clearly, and approach every interaction with calm confidence. It's a gentle next step toward understanding your emotions, not as obstacles, but as valuable signals that guide wiser decisions and inner balance. If you're ready to build that awareness and find more peace in your daily life, I invite you to download your free copy by visiting emotions.booksforgrowth.com to get started. That's emotions.books4growth.com. Again, emotions.booksforgrowth.com.
I hope you are enjoying my audiobook so far. It would be a pleasure if you could let me know how you are feeling about this audiobook in the comments section below. We would greatly appreciate it if you could also like this video and subscribe to United Audiobooks to have access to more best-selling audiobooks in the future. Also, if you are interested in getting more free audiobooks, please click the first link in the description below. Now, let us carry on with the next chapter.
Chapter 2. Cognitive Behavioral Breakthrough. Tools to Tame Your Thoughts. Break free from the prison of your thoughts. The relentless cycle of overthinking can feel like being trapped in a maze with no exit. You replay conversations, analyze decisions from every angle, and imagine worst-case scenarios until your mind becomes exhausted. This mental hamster wheel isn't just frustrating, it's debilitating. But what if there was a systematic approach to dismantle this pattern? What if you could train your brain to recognize when it's spiraling and redirect it toward clarity? Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, CBT, offers precisely this roadmap. Unlike vague advice to just think positively, CBT provides concrete strategies to identify, challenge, and transform the thought patterns that fuel overthinking. Developed and refined through decades of psychological research, these techniques have helped countless people regain control of their mental landscape, and they can work for you too. At the core of CBT is a revolutionary insight. Overthinking isn't random mental chaos, but follows predictable patterns called cognitive distortions. These distortions, like catastrophizing, black and white thinking, or mind reading, act as invisible lenses that distort your perception of reality. You're not consciously choosing to overthink. Rather, these habitual thought patterns have become your brain's default setting. The good news? What's learned can be unlearned. In this chapter, we'll explore how these distortions hijack your thinking and keep you trapped in mental loops. You'll discover how to recognize when you're catastrophizing a minor mistake into a career-ending disaster, or when you're mind-reading negative judgments from others without evidence. This awareness alone can be transformative, creating space between stimulus and response where your freedom to choose a different mental path begins. But awareness is just the beginning. You'll also master practical CBT techniques like cognitive restructuring, a process that helps you systematically evaluate and adjust distorted thoughts. Think of it as becoming your own thought detective, gathering evidence and challenging assumptions rather than accepting every worried thought as fact. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about accurate thinking that reflects reality rather than anxiety-fueled imagination. The power of CBT lies in its practicality. We'll introduce exercises like thought journals that help you track patterns in your overthinking and behavioral experiments that allow you to test your fears against reality. These aren't abstract theories, but hands-on tools you can implement immediately. When you catch yourself spiraling about an upcoming presentation, for instance, you'll have concrete steps to challenge catastrophic predictions and generate more balanced alternatives. What makes these techniques particularly valuable is their cumulative effect. Each time you catch and correct a distorted thought, you're not just solving a momentary problem, you're rewiring neural pathways. With practice, balanced thinking becomes more automatic, requiring less conscious effort. The mind that once raced uncontrollably begins to settle naturally into clearer, calmer patterns. This is why CBT has such a lasting impact. It changes not just what you think, but how you think. As we explore these tools throughout this chapter, remember that perfection isn't the goal. Progress is. There will be days when overthinking gets the upper hand, and that's okay. What matters is developing the awareness and skills to navigate back to clarity more quickly each time. The journey from overthinking to balanced thinking isn't a straight line, but a practice, one that grows stronger with each distorted thought you recognize and reshape. Let's begin building that practice together. The weight of every thought. The room felt smaller at night. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold. Through the window, the moon cast a silver glow across the backyard, where shadows of trees stretched like long fingers across the grass. Her journal lay open before her, a blank page staring back. She wrote the date at the top, then paused. Dr. Chen's words from yesterday's session echoed. Write down the thoughts exactly as they come. Don't edit, don't judge, just record. Sarah pressed the pen to paper, hesitated, then began. 3 a.m., and I'm certain I said something wrong at the meeting. Did Carlos look annoyed when I interrupted? Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. What if they're discussing replacing me? I'll never get the promotion. I'll be stuck forever. I'll fail like I always do. She stopped writing and looked at the words. The thoughts seemed so real on paper, yet somehow more separate from her. The refrigerator hummed in the background, a steady counterpoint to the chaos in her mind. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping across the wall like a lighthouse beam. Dr. Chen had explained how thoughts weren't facts. Your mind is creating stories, she had said, pushing her glasses up her nose. The catastrophizing, the all or nothing thinking. These are distortions, not reality. Sarah had nodded, understanding in theory but doubting in practice. Now she looked at the second column she had drawn on the page and wrote, Evidence? She couldn't recall Carlos's actual expression. She remembered him asking a question later, not the behavior of someone who was annoyed. The neighbor's dog barked twice, sharp, in the night stillness. Sarah looked up, momentarily pulled from her thoughts. She stood, stretched her back until it cracked, and moved to the sink. Water splashed against the stainless steel as she rinsed her mug. The sound grounded her, simple and real. She dried her hands on a kitchen towel and returned to the table. In the third column, alternative thought, she wrote slowly, I contributed to the meeting. If I misspoke, it wasn't catastrophic. People are more focused on their own concerns than on analyzing my words. One comment doesn't define my worth or career trajectory. The words felt foreign, like speaking a language she was still learning. But there was something solid about them too, something that pushed back against the quicksand of her usual thoughts. She closed the journal and looked at the clock. Nearly 4. The experimental homework Dr. Chen assigned, challenging a thought before bed, had taken longer than expected. Sarah ran her hand across the leather cover of the journal. The night felt different now. Not lighter exactly, but as if the darkness had edges she could see. Tomorrow, she would try the behavioral experiment they'd discussed, speaking up early in the meeting rather than waiting until anxiety had built into a crescendo. She would observe reactions without assuming the worst. She would collect evidence rather than conjure catastrophes. The thought both terrified and steadied her. Sarah moved toward her bedroom, leaving the journal on the table. The moonlight still painted the kitchen in silver and shadow, but the shapes seemed less menacing now. What might change, she wondered, if she could learn to see her thoughts not as immutable truths, but as hypotheses waiting to be tested. Understanding cognitive distortions. Our minds are storytellers. Every day they construct narratives about our experiences, relationships, and the world around us. For many who struggle with overthinking, these stories often become distorted, creating a funhouse mirror effect that warps reality in subtle yet powerful ways. Cognitive distortions, systematic errors in thinking, act as the engine behind persistent overthinking, pushing our minds into repetitive loops of worry and rumination. Think of cognitive distortions as bugs in your mental software. Just as a small coding error can cause an entire program to malfunction, these thinking errors can disrupt your entire thought process. When left unchecked, they consume mental bandwidth, drain emotional energy, and make clear decision-making nearly impossible. Research consistently shows that identifying these distortions is the first critical step toward breaking free from overthinking patterns. The most common distortions include catastrophizing, assuming the worst possible outcome will occur; black and white thinking, seeking situations in absolute terms without middle ground; mind reading, believing you know what others are thinking without evidence; and overgeneralization, applying one negative experience to all other similar situations. Each distortion acts like a specific lens that colors how you interpret situations. Someone caught in catastrophizing might receive a brief email from their boss requesting a meeting and immediately spiral into fears about being fired, while someone engaged in mind reading might assume a friend who doesn't text back immediately is angry with them. Learning to identify these patterns requires developing what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. This skill doesn't come naturally to most people. It requires practice and deliberate attention to the narratives running through your mind. Start by becoming curious about your thought patterns without immediate judgment. When you notice anxiety or stress rising, pause and ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now? What assumptions am I making without evidence? Recognizing cognitive distortions is the cornerstone of breaking free from overthinking. You cannot change what you cannot name. Challenging distorted thinking. Cognitive behavioral therapy offers powerful techniques to challenge and restructure distorted thinking patterns once you've identified them. At its core, cognitive restructuring involves examining your automatic thoughts and replacing them with more balanced alternatives. This process isn't about positive thinking, but rather accurate thinking, assessing situations based on evidence rather than emotional reactions. The technique begins with self-monitoring, which involves tracking your thoughts, especially during periods of heightened anxiety or overthinking. Many therapists recommend using a structured format where you document the situation, your automatic thoughts, the emotions these thoughts trigger, and the intensity of those emotions. This documentation creates distance between you and your thoughts, allowing you to see them as mental events rather than absolute truths. Once you've captured these thoughts, the next step is to evaluate them like a detective examining evidence. Ask yourself questions like, what facts support this thought? What facts contradict it? Am I confusing feelings with facts? What would I tell a friend who had this thought? These questions help dismantle distorted thinking by introducing a more logical perspective. Imagine your thoughts as witnesses in a courtroom. A good lawyer doesn't simply accept testimony at face value, but cross-examines each witness to test their credibility. Similarly, cognitive restructuring teaches you to cross-examine your thoughts rather than accepting their initial testimony. This doesn't mean dismissing your concerns entirely. Some worries contain valuable information, but rather assessing them with greater objectivity. The power of these techniques lies in their simplicity and practicality. They don't require special equipment or extended therapy sessions to implement. With consistent practice, they become natural responses to overthinking episodes. Research shows that individuals who regularly practice cognitive restructuring experience significant reductions in anxiety and rumination over time. Consistency is crucial when implementing these techniques. Many people attempt cognitive restructuring a few times and abandon it when they don't see immediate results. However, these skills are more like learning a musical instrument than taking medication. The benefits come from regular practice rather than an instantaneous effect. Your brain has spent years reinforcing certain thought patterns, and creating new neural pathways takes time and repetition. Another powerful CBT technique is the downward arrow approach, which helps uncover core beliefs driving surface-level overthinking. This involves repeatedly asking yourself what a particular thought means about you, others, or your future. For example, if you're overthinking a minor mistake at work, asking, "What does this mean to me?" might reveal a core belief like, "I must never make mistakes," or "Any error proves I'm incompetent." Identifying these underlying beliefs allows you to address the root cause of overthinking rather than just its symptoms. What would your life look like if you could examine your thoughts with curiosity instead of being consumed by them? Practical tools for transformation. Thought journals represent one of the most accessible and powerful tools in the CBT arsenal. Unlike standard journaling, thought journals follow a structured format that guides you through the process of identifying, analyzing, and adjusting distorted thinking patterns. The simple act of writing down overthinking episodes creates immediate relief by externalizing thoughts that otherwise remain trapped in recursive mental loops. The most effective thought journals typically include columns for the situation, automatic thoughts, emotions, evidence for and against the thought, and an alternative, more balanced perspective. This format naturally guides you through the cognitive restructuring process. Many people report feeling significant relief even before reaching the alternative thought column, simply from seeing their concerns laid out in black and white. What seemed overwhelming in the mind often appears more manageable on paper. Think of your thought journal as a personal laboratory where you can experiment with different perspectives. Scientists don't approach experiments with the assumption that their hypothesis is absolutely correct. They remain open to what the evidence reveals. Similarly, your thought journal creates space to test the accuracy of your thoughts rather than assuming they represent reality. Over time, patterns emerge that help you identify your specific cognitive distortion tendencies. Behavioral experiments take cognitive work a step further by testing distorted predictions in real-world situations. If overthinking leads you to predict catastrophic outcomes, if I speak up in the meeting, everyone will think I'm incompetent. A behavioral experiment involves deliberately taking that action while monitoring what actually happens. These experiments are particularly effective because they provide concrete evidence that can contradict long-held beliefs more powerfully than thought exercises alone. The CLEAR method: cognitive liberation and emotional awareness restructuring. The CLEAR method represents a comprehensive framework for implementing CBT principles to combat overthinking. This 5-step process integrates the most effective elements of cognitive behavioral therapy into a practical, repeatable system that builds skills progressively. Component 1. Capture thoughts. The first component of the CLEAR method involves capturing automatic thoughts as they occur. This step creates awareness of thinking patterns that often operate below conscious awareness. Using a thought journal, smartphone note, or voice memo, document thoughts that trigger anxiety, rumination, or other uncomfortable emotions. When capturing thoughts, record them verbatim without editing or analyzing. The goal is to create an accurate record of your internal dialogue. Include contextual factors like time of day, physical location, preceding events, and physical sensations. These details often reveal patterns or triggers that contribute to overthinking episodes. The capture phase builds the foundation for the entire process by generating the raw material needed for analysis. Without this step, thoughts remain abstract and difficult to examine objectively. Regular practice strengthens metacognitive awareness, your ability to observe your thinking process rather than being caught up in it. Component 2. Label distortions. Once thoughts are captured, the next component involves identifying specific cognitive distortions present in your thinking. This labeling process helps break down overwhelming thought patterns into recognizable categories that can be addressed systematically. Common distortions to watch for include catastrophizing, assuming the worst outcome, all or nothing thinking, seeing situations in black and white terms, personalization, assuming responsibility for events beyond your control, and emotional reasoning, assuming feelings reflect reality. Learning to recognize these patterns turns abstract anxiety into concrete, addressable issues. The label component transforms vague feelings of distress into specific thinking errors that can be challenged. This classification system also helps you recognize recurring patterns. Unique. Chapter 2. Cognitive Behavioral Breakthrough. Tools to tame your thoughts. Break free from the prison of your thoughts. The relentless cycle of overthinking can feel like being trapped in a maze with no exit. You replay conversations, analyze decisions from every angle, and imagine worst-case scenarios until your mind becomes exhausted. This mental hamster wheel isn't just frustrating, it's debilitating. But what if there was a systematic approach to dismantle this pattern? What if you could train your brain to recognize when it's spiraling and redirect it toward clarity? Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, CBT, offers precisely this roadmap. Unlike vague advice to just think positively, CBT provides concrete strategies to identify, challenge, and transform the thought patterns that fuel overthinking. Developed and refined through decades of psychological research, these techniques have helped countless people regain control of their mental landscape, and they can work for you too. At the core of CBT is a revolutionary insight. Overthinking isn't random mental chaos, but follows predictable patterns called cognitive distortions. These distortions, like catastrophizing, black and white thinking, or mind reading, act as invisible lenses that distort your perception of reality. You're not consciously choosing to overthink. Rather, these habitual thought patterns have become your brain's default setting. The good news? What's learned can be unlearned. In this chapter, we'll explore how these distortions hijack your thinking and keep you trapped in mental loops. You'll discover how to recognize when you're catastrophizing a minor mistake into a career-ending disaster, or when you're mind-reading negative judgments from others without evidence. This awareness alone can be transformative, creating space between stimulus and response, where your freedom to choose a different mental path begins. But awareness is just the beginning. You'll also master practical CBT techniques, like cognitive restructuring, a process that helps you systematically evaluate and adjust distorted thoughts. Think of it as becoming your own thought detective, gathering evidence and challenging assumptions rather than accepting every worried thought as fact. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about accurate thinking that reflects reality rather than anxiety-fueled imagination. The power of CBT lies in its practicality. We'll introduce exercises like thought journals that help you track patterns in your overthinking and behavioral experiments that allow you to test your fears against reality. These aren't abstract theories, but hands-on tools you can implement immediately. When you catch yourself spiraling about an upcoming presentation, for instance, you'll have concrete steps to challenge catastrophic predictions and generate more balanced alternatives. What makes these techniques particularly valuable is their cumulative effect. Each time you catch and correct a distorted thought, you're not just solving a momentary problem, you're rewiring neural pathways. With practice, balanced thinking becomes more automatic, requiring less conscious effort. The mind that once raced uncontrollably begins to settle naturally into clearer, calmer patterns. This is why CBT has such a lasting impact. It changes not just what you think, but how you think. As we explore these tools throughout this chapter, remember that perfection isn't the goal. Progress is. There will be days when overthinking gets the upper hand, and that's okay. What matters is developing the awareness and skills to navigate back to clarity more quickly each time. The journey from overthinking to balanced thinking isn't a straight line, but a practice, one that grows stronger with each distorted thought you recognize and reshape. Let's begin building that practice together. The weight of every thought. The room felt smaller at night. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold. Through the window, the moon cast a silver glow across the backyard, where shadows of trees stretched like long fingers across the grass. Her journal lay open before her, a blank page staring back. She wrote the date at the top, then paused. Dr. Chen's words from yesterday's session echoed. Write down the thoughts exactly as they come. Don't edit, don't judge, just record. Sarah pressed the pen to paper, hesitated, then began. 3 a.m., and I'm certain I said something wrong at the meeting. Did Carlos look annoyed when I interrupted? Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. What if they're discussing replacing me? I'll never get the promotion. I'll be stuck forever. I'll fail like I always do. She stopped writing and looked at the words. The thoughts seemed so real on paper, yet somehow more separate from her. The refrigerator hummed in the background, a steady counterpoint to the chaos in her mind. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping across the wall like a lighthouse beam. Dr. Chen had explained how thoughts weren't facts. Your mind is creating stories, she had said, pushing her glasses up her nose. The catastrophizing, the all or nothing thinking. These are distortions, not reality. Sarah had nodded, understanding in theory but doubting in practice. Now she looked at the second column she had drawn on the page and wrote, Evidence? She couldn't recall Carlos's actual expression. She remembered him asking a question later, not the behavior of someone who was annoyed. The neighbor's dog barked twice, sharp, in the night stillness. Sarah looked up, momentarily pulled from her thoughts. She stood, stretched her back until it cracked, and moved to the sink. Water splashed against the stainless steel as she rinsed her mug. The sound grounded her, simple and real. She dried her hands on a kitchen towel and returned to the table. In the third column, alternative thought, she wrote slowly, I contributed to the meeting. If I misspoke, it wasn't catastrophic. People are more focused on their own concerns than on analyzing my words. One comment doesn't define my worth or career trajectory. The words felt foreign, like speaking a language she was still learning. But there was something solid about them too, something that pushed back against the quicksand of her usual thoughts. She closed the journal and looked at the clock. Nearly 4. The experimental homework Dr. Chen assigned, challenging a thought before bed, had taken longer than expected. Sarah ran her hand across the leather cover of the journal. The night felt different now. Not lighter exactly, but as if the darkness had edges she could see. Tomorrow, she would try the behavioral experiment they'd discussed, speaking up early in the meeting rather than waiting until anxiety had built into a crescendo. She would observe reactions without assuming the worst. She would collect evidence rather than conjure catastrophes. The thought both terrified and steadied her. Sarah moved toward her bedroom, leaving the journal on the table. The moonlight still painted the kitchen in silver and shadow, but the shapes seemed less menacing now. What might change, she wondered, if she could learn to see her thoughts not as immutable truths, but as hypotheses waiting to be tested. Understanding cognitive distortions. Our minds are storytellers. Every day they construct narratives about our experiences, relationships, and the world around us. For many who struggle with overthinking, these stories often become distorted, creating a funhouse mirror effect that warps reality in subtle yet powerful ways. Cognitive distortions, systematic errors in thinking, act as the engine behind persistent overthinking, pushing our minds into repetitive loops of worry and rumination. Think of cognitive distortions as bugs in your mental software. Just as a small coding error can cause an entire program to malfunction, these thinking errors can disrupt your entire thought process. When left unchecked, they consume mental bandwidth, drain emotional energy, and make clear decision-making nearly impossible. Research consistently shows that identifying these distortions is the first critical step toward breaking free from overthinking patterns. The most common distortions include catastrophizing, assuming the worst possible outcome will occur; black and white thinking, seeking situations in absolute terms without middle ground; mind reading, believing you know what others are thinking without evidence; and overgeneralization, applying one negative experience to all other similar situations. Each distortion acts like a specific lens that colors how you interpret situations. Someone caught in catastrophizing might receive a brief email from their boss requesting a meeting and immediately spiral into fears about being fired, while someone engaged in mind reading might assume a friend who doesn't text back immediately is angry with them. Learning to identify these patterns requires developing what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. This skill doesn't come naturally to most people. It requires practice and deliberate attention to the narratives running through your mind. Start by becoming curious about your thought patterns without immediate judgment. When you notice anxiety or stress rising, pause and ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now? What assumptions am I making without evidence? Recognizing cognitive distortions is the cornerstone of breaking free from overthinking. You cannot change what you cannot name. Challenging distorted thinking. Cognitive behavioral therapy offers powerful techniques to challenge and restructure distorted thinking patterns once you've identified them. At its core, cognitive restructuring involves examining your automatic thoughts and replacing them with more balanced alternatives. This process isn't about positive thinking, but rather accurate thinking, assessing situations based on evidence rather than emotional reactions. The technique begins with self-monitoring, which involves tracking your thoughts, especially during periods of heightened anxiety. Chapter 3. Active Engagement, Shifting Gears from Paralysis to Progress. From spinning your wheels to taking the driver's seat. The moment you catch yourself rehashing the same worry for the 15th time, you've entered the familiar territory of overthinking. Your mind circles endlessly around problems without moving towards solutions, leaving you mentally exhausted, yet no closer to resolution. This pattern, what psychologists call rumination, is the very definition of being stuck. But what if you could transform this mental paralysis into productive momentum? Overthinking creates an illusion of problem solving while actually keeping us trapped in inaction. We mistake mental activity for progress when, in reality, we're simply wearing deeper grooves into our anxiety pathways. The difference between productive thinking and overthinking often comes down to one crucial decision: active engagement versus passive rumination. When you ruminate, you're a spectator to your problems. When you actively engage, you become their solver. This shift from passive to active thinking represents one of cognitive behavioral therapy's most powerful insights. Rather than endlessly analyzing why something happened or worrying about what might occur, CBT encourages us to ask, what can I do about this right now? The simple question transforms our relationship with our thoughts, moving us from victims of circumstance to agents of change. It's not about thinking less, it's about thinking differently. In the coming sections, we'll explore how to recognize when you've slipped into passive rumination and develop practical strategies to pivot toward constructive problem solving. You'll learn to distinguish between solvable and unsolvable concerns, allowing you to direct your mental energy where it can actually make a difference. This distinction alone can free countless hours previously lost to fruitless worry. We'll also tackle the overwhelm that often triggers overthinking spirals by introducing methods for setting realistic goals and prioritizing effectively. When everything feels urgent and important, the mind freezes, unable to determine where to begin. By creating clear frameworks for decision-making, you'll develop confidence in your ability to handle complex situations without falling into analysis paralysis. Perhaps most challenging, yet ultimately most liberating, we'll work on cultivating acceptance for outcomes beyond your control. The reality is that some situations simply cannot be solved through additional thinking. Learning to recognize these boundaries and redirect your energy accordingly isn't giving up, it's wisdom. You'll discover how acknowledging limitations actually expands your capacity for meaningful action elsewhere. The journey from overthinking to purposeful action isn't about perfection or eliminating all worry. It's about developing a new relationship with your thoughts, one where you remain in the driver's seat rather than being dragged along behind them. As we move through this chapter together, remember that each small shift from passive rumination to active engagement represents real progress. Your overthinking patterns weren't created overnight, and neither will your new habits be. But with consistent practice of the techniques we'll explore, you'll gradually reclaim control of your mental landscape, breaking free from the thought loop. The air in Martin's apartment felt stale. He opened a window, and the breeze that swept in carried with it scents of rain-washed pavement and distant food carts. The clock on his wall ticked past 4 in the afternoon, yet Martin had accomplished nothing but wear a path in his carpet from pacing. He sat at his desk and stared at the blank document on his computer screen. The deadline for his project proposal loomed 3 days away, but for weeks, his mind had churned the same thoughts without progress. What if they hate my ideas? What if I'm not qualified enough? What if I'm overlooking something obvious? The questions spun like clothes in a dryer, around and around, with no resolution. This is ridiculous, he muttered, pushing away from the desk. His fingers drummed against his thigh as he moved back to the window. Outside, a construction crew worked with purpose, each person performing a specific task. They didn't stand around wondering if they should use a hammer or worrying about what might happen if the building didn't turn out perfectly. They simply built. Martin returned to his desk and pulled out a notebook. His therapist had suggested a different approach last week. Instead of thinking about all the ways your proposal might fail, try breaking down what needs to be done. He drew a line down the middle of the page. On the left, he wrote things I can control, and on the right, things I cannot control. Under the first column, he wrote, research market trends, outline 3 main points, and create a timeline. His hand hesitated over the second column before writing, committee's mood, competing proposals, budget changes. A text message interrupted his thoughts. His sister, how's the proposal coming? Still overthinking it? Martin looked down at his divided page. For the first time in weeks, the path forward appeared clearer than the fog of his concerns. He could research market trends right now. He could outline those 3 points tonight. The committee's mood, not his problem. The construction noise outside grew louder, and Martin watched a worker confidently swing a hammer. Each stroke served a purpose. Each action moved toward completion. Martin turned back to his computer and created a new document with a title, Action Steps. His fingers moved across the keyboard with intention now. The thought still came. What if this isn't good enough? But instead of spiraling into that familiar pattern, he acknowledged the thought and returned to the task at hand. The question wasn't useful unless it led to action. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across his desk, Martin had filled 2 pages with concrete steps. He felt the weight on his chest lighten, not because the proposal was finished or because success was guaranteed, but because he had shifted from passive worry to active problem solving. The problems hadn't changed, but his relationship to them had transformed. He stood and stretched, realizing he hadn't checked the time in hours. What would happen, he wondered, if he applied the same approach to other areas of his life, where overthinking had built impenetrable walls of inaction? Passive rumination versus active problem solving. Have you ever found yourself stuck in a mental loop, replaying the same thoughts over and over? You analyze what went wrong, why it happened, and how terrible it feels, yet nothing changes. This is passive rumination, a thinking pattern that traps us in analyzing problems without making progress towards solutions. Passive rumination is like walking on a treadmill. You're expending mental energy and feeling the exhaustion, but you're not actually moving forward. Your thoughts circle endlessly around problems, fears, and past mistakes. The more you ruminate, the deeper the mental groove becomes, making it increasingly difficult to step off this exhausting cycle. What distinguishes passive rumination from active problem solving? The key difference lies in orientation and outcome. Passive rumination is backward-looking, emotion-focused, and generally unproductive. You might spend hours dissecting a conversation that went poorly, repeatedly reviewing what you said and how the other person responded. Your emotional distress increases with each mental replay, yet no solutions emerge. Active problem solving, by contrast, acknowledges the problem, but quickly shifts towards potential solutions. It asks productive questions. What can I learn from this? What are my options now? What's one small step I can take? This approach resembles a hiker consulting a map after realizing they've taken a wrong turn. Rather than lamenting the mistake repeatedly, they assess their current position, identify possible routes forward, and start walking. The brain chemistry involved in these two processes differs significantly. Rumination activates stress response systems and can lead to elevated cortisol levels over extended periods. This physical state makes creative thinking and rational decision-making more difficult. Active problem solving engages the prefrontal cortex, our brain's planning center, promoting clearer thinking and emotional regulation. Becoming aware of your thinking patterns is the first step toward breaking free from rumination. Notice when your thoughts are spinning without producing solutions. Are you asking the same questions repeatedly? Are you focusing exclusively on what went wrong rather than what could go right? This awareness creates the opportunity to consciously shift gears. Psychologists studying overthinking have found that simply labeling your thought pattern can help interrupt it. When you catch yourself ruminating, try saying aloud, "I'm ruminating right now." The small act creates momentary distance from the thought loop and opens a window for choosing a different response. Active problem solving involves breaking down challenges into manageable pieces. Instead of tackling the entirety of a complex situation at once, focus on identifying one aspect where you can take immediate action. This creates momentum and provides evidence that you're not helpless, a powerful antidote to the paralysis rumination creates. This shift doesn't happen automatically. It requires practice and intention. When you find yourself spinning in rumination, gently but firmly redirect your attention to questions that prompt action. What's one thing within my control right now? What would be a reasonable next step? How can I move forward, even if just slightly? The fundamental distinction is this. Rumination keeps you paralyzed in the problem, while active problem solving propels you toward progress, however small. Setting realistic goals and prioritizing tasks. When overthinking paralyzes us, one of the most effective antidotes is clear, purposeful action. However, the path from paralysis to progress requires more than just doing something. It demands thoughtful goal setting and strategic prioritization, transforms vague worries into concrete tasks. Setting realistic goals begins with specificity. Vague aspirations like be less anxious or stop overthinking provide no clear direction for action. Instead, reformulate these broad desires into specific, measurable objectives. Practice 5 minutes of mindfulness when I notice rumination beginning, or write down 3 possible solutions when faced with a problem rather than just worrying about it. The psychology behind this approach is well established. Our brains respond differently to specific goals than to abstract wishes. When we clarify exactly what we're aiming for, the prefrontal cortex, our brain's planning center, can engage more effectively. This specificity reduces the ambiguity that feeds overthinking and creates clear metrics for progress. Think of your mind as a car stuck in mud. The more the wheels spin without traction, the deeper you sink. Setting concrete goals is like placing solid planks under those spinning wheels. They provide the traction needed to move forward rather than digging deeper into the mire of overthinking. Realistic goal setting must account for your current capacity and circumstances. During periods of high stress or limited resources, scaling back expectations becomes essential. This isn't lowering standards, it's strategic adaptation. A modest goal accomplished builds momentum, while an ambitious goal abandoned reinforces the paralysis of overthinking. Research in behavioral psychology suggests that success breeds success. Each small goal achieved releases dopamine, creating positive reinforcement that motivates further action. This creates an upward spiral, gradually counteracting the downward spiral of overthinking. Start with goals so small they seem almost trivial, what psychologist B.J. Fogg calls tiny habits, and build from there. Once you've established specific, realistic goals, prioritization becomes the next crucial skill. Not all tasks deserve equal attention, yet overthinking often treats every concern as equally urgent. Learning to distinguish between what's truly important and what merely seems pressing is essential for breaking free from mental paralysis. The Eisenhower matrix offers a simple framework for prioritization, sorting tasks along 2 dimensions: importance and urgency. Important and urgent tasks require immediate attention. Important but not urgent tasks deserve scheduled time for thoughtful completion. Urgent but unimportant tasks might be delegated. Neither important nor urgent, these can often be eliminated entirely, freeing mental space. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, wrote psychiatrist Viktor Frankl. In that space is our power to choose our response. Prioritization creates that crucial space between the stimulus of a concern arising and your response to it. Instead of immediately ruminating, you can assess, where does this fit in my hierarchy of priorities? Does it deserve immediate attention, scheduled consideration, delegation, or release? The skill of prioritization extends beyond sorting tasks. It includes recognizing when perfectionism drives your overthinking. Perfectionism demands that everything receive maximum effort, creating impossible standards that feed rumination. Effective prioritization acknowledges that some tasks deserve your best effort, while others need only to be completed adequately. Learning to distinguish between these scenarios frees tremendous mental energy. For many overthinkers, decision fatigue compounds the challenge. Each decision requires mental energy, and when that energy depletes, the default becomes either impulsive choices or paralyzing indecision. Creating systems that reduce decision points, like establishing standard procedures for routine tasks, preserves mental resources for truly important decisions. What would become possible in your life if you replaced vague worries with specific goals and endless rumination with strategic prioritization? Accepting the uncontrollable. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. This crucial distinction often gets lost when discussing how to handle situations beyond our control. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's recognizing reality accurately so you can respond effectively rather than waste energy fighting what cannot be changed. The human mind naturally resists accepting uncontrollable circumstances. We're wired to believe that with enough thought, enough analysis, or enough worry, we can somehow influence outcomes that are fundamentally beyond our reach. This illusion of control fuels overthinking, keeping us mentally chained to situations we cannot change. Psychologists studying anxiety and rumination have identified this resistance to acceptance as a major driver of mental suffering. When we refuse to accept reality as it is, we create an additional layer of distress. Not just the difficulty of the situation itself, but the added suffering of fighting against it. This resembles swimming against a powerful current, exhausting your energy fighting forces you cannot overcome, instead of finding ways to work with them. Learning to distinguish between what you can and cannot control is a skill that develops with practice. Start by asking yourself, is this something I have direct influence over? If the answer is no, the next question becomes, how am I responding to this uncontrollable circumstance? This simple assessment interrupts the automatic pattern of overthinking and redirects attention toward constructive responses. The shift process, from paralysis to progress. The journey from overthinking to action follows a reliable path that anyone can learn to navigate. The shift process offers a structured approach to move from passive rumination to active problem solving, helping you reclaim control when thoughts spiral. Each step builds on the previous one, creating momentum away from paralysis and toward progress. Step 1. Separate thoughts from facts. The first step in breaking free from overthinking is distinguishing between what's actually happening and what your mind says about what's happening. Our thoughts often masquerade as facts, especially when we're anxious or stressed. Begin by identifying your thoughts and labeling them as thoughts, not reality. For instance, replace "this situation is hopeless" with "I'm having the thought that this situation is hopeless." This small linguistic shift creates crucial distance between you and your thoughts, allowing you to examine them more objectively. Next, identify verifiable facts about the situation. What can be proven? What would hold up in a court of evidence? This distinction prevents catastrophizing and helps ground your thinking in reality rather than worst-case scenarios. The separation isn't always easy. Our thoughts feel convincing, especially when charged with emotion. A helpful practice is writing down your thoughts, then highlighting in one color the statements that are verifiable facts, and in another color the statements that are interpretations, predictions, or assumptions. This visual exercise makes the distinction clearer. The benefit of this separation extends beyond the immediate situation. With practice, you'll develop the habit of questioning your thoughts automatically, creating a buffer between initial reactions and responses that prevents overthinking from taking hold. Step 2. Highlight what's within your control. Once you've separated thoughts from facts, assess what aspects of the situation fall within your sphere of influence. This critical step prevents wasted energy on circumstances you cannot change. Draw 3 concentric circles on paper. In the innermost circle, list elements completely within your control, typically your own thoughts, choices, and actions. In the middle circle, list things you can influence but not control entirely, such as relationships or some work outcomes. In the outermost circle, place everything beyond your influence, like others' decisions, market conditions, or past events. This visual representation makes clear where to focus your energy. The most effective problem solving targets the innermost circle first, then moves to the middle circle as appropriate. The outer circle requires acceptance, rather than problem-solving efforts. Many overthinkers make the mistake of concentrating their mental energy on the outermost circle, spinning endless scenarios about things they cannot change. This misplaced focus is the primary fuel for unproductive rumination and the feeling of helplessness that accompanies it. By consistently redirecting your attention to what's within your control, you reclaim agency and build confidence in your ability to effect meaningful change, however limited the scope may initially seem. Step 3. Identify possible solutions. With clarity about what's within your control, you're ready to generate potential solutions. This phase emphasizes quantity over quality. Your goal is to produce as many options as possible without immediately judging them. Set a timer for 5 minutes and write down every potential action you could take, regardless of how impractical some might seem. This time constraint prevents perfectionism from stalling the process and forces your brain to move beyond obvious answers into more creative territory. The key to effective brainstorming is suspending judgment. Your critical mind will want to evaluate each idea immediately, but this premature judgment limits creativity. Tell yourself you'll assess the ideas later, and for now, simply capture everything that comes to mind. Consider approaching the situation from different perspectives. How might someone you admire handle this challenge? What would you advise a friend facing the same circumstances? These perspective shifts often reveal options your overthinking mind overlooks when focused solely on your own viewpoint. After generating multiple options, review your list and eliminate any that are clearly unworkable or inconsistent with your values. From the remaining possibilities, identify those that address factors within your control and that you can implement relatively quickly. These become candidates for your action plan. Step 4. Focus on first steps. With potential solutions identified, the next stage involves breaking them down into concrete, manageable actions. Overthinkers often get overwhelmed looking at the entirety of a solution, which can trigger more rumination rather than progress. Select one promising solution and identify the very first physical action needed to implement it. This initial step should be specific and small enough to complete in a single sitting. Rather than start exercising regularly, your first step might be research 3 nearby gyms and their hours, or even place workout clothes next to the bed for tomorrow morning. This micro-step approach bypasses the brain's threat detection system, which can trigger resistance when faced with large changes. Small actions don't register as threatening, making it easier to overcome inertia and build momentum. Once you've identified this first step, schedule exactly when you'll take it. Vague intentions like soon or when I feel ready often lead nowhere. Instead, commit to a specific time. Today at 2 p.m., I'll spend 15 minutes researching gyms. This specificity dramatically increases the likelihood of follow-through. Taking that first step creates what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect. An uncompleted task creates mental tension that motivates completion. Once you begin implementing a solution, your brain naturally wants to continue until the task is finished, helping overcome the paralysis that overthinking creates. Step 5. Track progress and adjust. The final component of the shift process involves monitoring your progress and refining your approach as needed. This step prevents perfectionism from derailing your efforts when initial results aren't ideal. Establish clear, observable markers that indicate progress. These might be completing specific actions, achieving particular outcomes, or noticing changes in your thought patterns or emotional state. Document these indicators regularly to make progress visible and provide evidence that you're moving forward. Expect and plan for obstacles. Identify potential challenges before they arise and develop contingency plans. This proactive approach prevents setbacks from triggering overthinking, as you'll already have alternative pathways identified. Review your progress at regular intervals and be willing to adjust your approach based on what you learn. If a particular solution isn't producing the desired results, this doesn't mean failure. It provides valuable information about what doesn't work, narrowing the field of what might work better. Celebrate small wins consistently. Your brain responds powerfully to recognition of progress, releasing neurochemicals that reinforce the behaviors leading to success. Even modest achievements deserve acknowledgement, as they collectively build the momentum that carries you forward. The shift process becomes more natural with practice. What initially requires conscious effort eventually becomes an automatic response to challenges, replacing the habit of overthinking with the habit of constructive problem solving. By embracing the shift process, separating thoughts from facts, highlighting what's within your control, identifying possible solutions, focusing on first steps, and tracking progress, you transform your relationship with difficult situations, moving from paralysis to progress and reclaiming the energy previously consumed by overthinking. Renowned psychologist Marsha Linehan, founder of dialectical behavior therapy, offers a powerful insight into acceptance. The path out of hell is through misery. By refusing to accept the misery that is part of climbing out of hell, you fall back into hell. This wisdom reminds us that accepting difficult realities isn't weakness. It's often the most courageous first step toward genuine change. Cultivating acceptance requires recognizing our common tendency toward thought-based avoidance. When faced with painful realities, the overthinking mind tries to think its way out of discomfort. It generates endless scenarios, replays past events, or projects catastrophic failures, anything to avoid sitting with the unvarnished truth of the present moment. True acceptance requires pausing this mental activity and allowing yourself to experience reality as it is, not as you wish it were. Accepting uncontrollable outcomes doesn't mean abandoning goals or surrendering agency. Rather, it means pursuing goals with a clear understanding of where your control begins and ends. You can control your efforts, but not always the results. You can influence relationships, but not control others' responses. This nuanced understanding prevents the frustration and resentment that fuel overthinking cycles. When we accept what we cannot change, we free up tremendous mental and emotional resources. These resources can then be redirected toward solvable problems and actionable steps. The energy previously consumed by fighting reality becomes available for creative problem solving and meaningful action within your sphere of influence. The STRIDE method, from rumination to resolution. The STRIDE method offers a practical framework to transform your overthinking habits into productive problem solving. This approach helps you systematically address issues rather than circling them endlessly in your mind. Step 1. Specify the problem. 5 minutes. Write down exactly what you're overthinking about. Be specific and concrete rather than vague or catastrophic. For example, instead of "my entire career is failing," write, "I'm concerned about meeting this project deadline." Step 2. Track potential solutions. 10 minutes. Brainstorm all possible solutions without judgment. List everything that comes to mind, from the practical to the creative. Give yourself permission to think broadly. This is not the time for evaluation. Step 3. Rank your options. 7 minutes. Review your solutions and rate each one on a scale of 1 to 10 for both feasibility and effectiveness. Circle the top 2 to 3 options that scored highest in both categories. Step 4. Implement with intention. 25-minute focus session. Choose your highest ranked solution and break it down into immediate next actions. Use a timer and work in a focus sprint, similar to the Pomodoro technique, on just one action step. Commit fully to this time block without allowing distractions. Step 5. Document your progress. 3 minutes. After your work session, quickly note what you accomplished and any obstacles you encountered. This creates accountability and provides valuable data on what works. Step 6. Evaluate and adjust. Weekly, 15 minutes. Set aside time each week to review your approach. What solutions moved you forward? Where did you get stuck? How has your relationship with the original problem changed? Use these insights to refine your process. The power of stride lies not just in addressing individual problems, but in gradually rewiring your default response to challenges. Over time, you'll find yourself automatically engaging with difficulties rather than avoiding them through rumination. This method works because it converts abstract worries into concrete tasks. It transforms the energy that would otherwise fuel overthinking into purposeful action. And importantly, it builds your confidence in handling life's uncertainties, a crucial skill for anyone prone to overthinking. As you move forward, remember that perfect solutions rarely exist. The goal isn't to eliminate all problems, but to develop the resilience and practical skills to address them effectively. You'll likely find that many issues that seemed overwhelming become manageable when approached with the right mindset and method. Active engagement doesn't mean you'll never worry again. It means you'll have reliable tools to move beyond worry when it arises. With practice, you'll spend less time trapped in mental loops and more time engaged in your life, making progress on what truly matters to you. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to sustain these positive changes and integrate them into your daily life for lasting transformation. The journey from overthinking to confident action isn't always linear, but with each step forward, you build the foundation for a more focused, purposeful life. Chapter 4: Mindful Moments, Embracing Calm in the Midst of Mental Storms. The paradox of mental chaos, finding stillness when your mind won't quiet. In the relentless torrent of modern life, our minds often become battlegrounds. That urgent email demands attention, the looming deadline creeps closer, and beneath it all runs an undercurrent of persistent thoughts, cycling, repeating, analyzing, stealing our peace and clouding our judgment. This mental marathon isn't productivity, it's overthinking, and is exhausting us. By now in your journey through this audiobook, you've recognized the patterns that trap you in mental loops, explored the cognitive distortions fueling your overthinking, and discovered techniques to challenge unhelpful thought patterns. Yet even with these tools, there remains a crucial element to mastering the overthinking mind, learning to be present, even when your thoughts are pulling you elsewhere. Mindfulness and acceptance aren't merely trendy wellness buzzwords. They represent powerful psychological approaches that fundamentally change our relationship with troublesome thoughts. When we learn to observe our thinking without immediately reacting to it, we create space between stimulus and response, the very space where freedom from overthinking begins. This chapter builds upon the cognitive restructuring techniques you've already explored, adding the dimension of present moment awareness that allows you to recognize when you're caught in mental storms and find your center again. What makes mindfulness particularly effective against overthinking is its paradoxical approach. Rather than fighting against unwanted thoughts, which often strengthens them, mindfulness teaches us to turn toward our experience with curiosity and compassion. When we accept that thinking is simply what minds do, sometimes helpfully, sometimes not, we remove the additional layer of distress that comes from believing we shouldn't be having certain thoughts. This acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means engaging with our thoughts more skillfully, with less reactivity and more intentionality. The urgency we attach to our thoughts drives much of our overthinking. How often have you felt that a worrisome thought required immediate attention, as though thinking through every possible scenario would somehow protect you? This perceived urgency creates a stress response that further impairs clear thinking. By practicing mindfulness, you'll learn to recognize that thoughts are simply mental events passing through your awareness, not emergencies requiring immediate action. This shift alone can dramatically reduce the power overthinking holds over you. Throughout this audiobook, we've emphasized practical, evidence-based strategies drawn from cognitive behavioral therapy to help you break free from overthinking patterns. This chapter complements those strategies by focusing on mindfulness practices that enhance your ability to recognize unhelpful thoughts as they arise and respond with intentional presence rather than automatic reaction. You'll discover how to create pockets of calm even on your busiest days. Train your attention to stay in the present moment and cultivate an accepting stance toward your experience that diminishes overthinking's grip. The techniques we'll explore in the following sections build upon everything you've learned so far. The thought records and cognitive restructuring methods from earlier chapters have helped you identify and challenge distorted thinking. Now, mindfulness practices will help you catch those thoughts earlier in the process and respond with greater awareness. The behavioral activation strategies you've implemented have helped break cycles of avoidance and rumination. Now, acceptance-based approaches will help you move forward with meaningful actions even when uncomfortable thoughts arise. Together, these approaches form a comprehensive toolkit for reclaiming your mental clarity. As we approach the conclusion of our journey together, this chapter represents the integration of cognitive strategies with present moment awareness, a powerful combination that addresses overthinking at its roots. By learning to apply mindfulness techniques, practice acceptance, and reduce impulsive reactions to your thoughts, you'll discover a newfound sense of mental spaciousness. The storm of overthinking may still arise occasionally. We're human, after all, but you'll no longer be swept away by it. Instead, you'll stand firm in your ability to recognize the pattern, return to the present moment, and choose your response with intention and clarity. The quiet in the storm. The rain streaked down the window pane in jagged lines, matching the scattered thoughts in Thomas's mind. He sat at his desk, staring at the email from his boss. Another urgent request with an impossible deadline. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type an immediate response, to say yes again, when every part of him wanted to say no. Thomas closed his eyes. The rain tapped against the glass with steady persistence. His breath came shallow and quick, his heart matching its pace. The thoughts rushed in like the tide. I'll have to work all weekend. Sarah will be disappointed again. I'll miss Jamie's soccer game, but if I say no, they might think I'm not committed. I could lose my position in the department. I might even lose my job. Just breathe, he whispered to himself, remembering what Dr. Reeves had told him. He placed his palms flat on the desk, feeling the cool wood beneath his skin. The sensation anchored him to the present moment. The office hummed around him, the distant conversation of colleagues, the soft whir of the printer, the clink of someone stirring coffee in the break room. Thomas inhaled deeply through his nose, counting to 4, held it for 7, then exhaled for 8 seconds. His phone buzzed. Sarah. Will you be home for dinner? The question glowed on the screen, innocent but loaded with history, all the times he had promised and failed to appear. Thomas looked back at the email, the cursor blinking patiently, waiting for his decision. The urgency that had gripped him moments before began to loosen. The thoughts were still there, but they had lost their hold on him. They were just thoughts after all, not commands, not true, just mental events passing through the landscape of his mind. From the corner of his eye, Thomas caught sight of the small river stone on his desk, a reminder from his hike in Colorado last summer. He picked it up, running his thumb over its smooth surface. The cool weight of it in his palm brought him back to that day by the river. The sun warm on his face, the sound of water rushing over rocks. He had felt peace then. It was still available to him now, if he could just remember how to access it. Thomas set the stone down and turned back to his computer. The email still waited for a response, but the panic had subsided. He recognized that he had options. He could negotiate the deadline. He could ask for help. He could set boundaries. The thoughts about catastrophic consequences were just that, thoughts, not predictions, not inevitable outcomes. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside, Thomas had found a pocket of calm. What happens when we learn to observe the urgent pull of our thoughts without being immediately swept away by their current? Taming the mental whirlwind. When we feel trapped in a cycle of overthinking, our mind resembles a runaway train, hurtling forward without brakes. Mindfulness techniques provide those much-needed breaks. By bringing our attention to the present moment, we create space between ourselves and our thoughts. This space allows us to observe our thinking patterns without becoming entangled in them. Research shows that regular mindfulness practice actually changes brain structure, particularly in areas responsible for attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. Picture your thoughts as clouds in the sky. Some days your mental sky is clear with just a few scattered clouds. Other days, it's overcrowded with dark, stormy thought clouds that block the sun. Mindfulness teaches you to be the sky, vast, unchanging, and always present, rather than identifying with the ever-changing clouds. The clouds may pass through, but they aren't you, and they certainly don't define you. This perspective shift is powerful for those caught in overthinking spirals. The simplest mindfulness technique involves focused breathing. Take 5 minutes daily to sit quietly and observe your breath. When intrusive thoughts arise, and they will, acknowledge them without judgment and gently return your focus to your breathing. This practice builds the mental muscle that helps you recognize when overthinking begins. Studies by neuroscientist Richard Davidson show that even 8 weeks of regular mindfulness practice can significantly reduce anxiety and negative thinking patterns. Body scan meditation offers another practical approach to present moment awareness. Starting from your toes and moving upward, pay attention to sensations in each part of your body. This grounds you in physical reality when your mind wants to spiral into hypothetical scenarios or ruminate on past events. The technique works because it activates your sensory awareness, which naturally pulls attention away from abstract thinking. Many overthinkers struggle with mindfulness initially because their thoughts seem too powerful or numerous. If this describes your experience, remember that mindfulness is a skill that improves with practice. Start with just 1 minute of focused attention daily, then gradually increase the duration. The goal isn't to eliminate thoughts, but to change your relationship with them. Even experienced meditators have busy minds. They've simply learned not to be bothered by mental activity. Mindfulness doesn't eliminate thoughts, but transforms your relationship with them, creating vital breathing space between stimulus and response, embracing what is. Acceptance strategies complement mindfulness by addressing our tendency to resist uncomfortable thoughts. When we judge certain thoughts as bad or try to push them away, we paradoxically strengthen their hold on us. Psychology researchers call this the ironic process theory. The more you try not to think about something, the more prominently it features in your mind. Instead, acceptance involves acknowledging thoughts without labeling them as good or bad. Think about acceptance as similar to dealing with quicksand. The natural impulse when caught in quicksand is to struggle and fight against it, which only makes you sink faster. The counterintuitive solution is to spread yourself out and move slowly, essentially accepting the situation rather than fighting it. Our thoughts work similarly. Fighting against unwanted thoughts creates tension that amplifies them, while acceptance diffuses their power. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change, said psychologist Carl Rogers. This insight lies at the heart of acceptance strategies. By allowing your thoughts to exist without battling them, you remove the fuel that keeps them burning. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation or giving up. It means acknowledging reality as it is before deciding how to respond. One practical acceptance technique is to name your thoughts as they arise. When you notice yourself overthinking, silently label the process: planning thought, worrying thought, or judging thought. This creates distance between you and the thought content, reducing its emotional impact. Research from UCLA found that verbal labeling of emotions reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, while activating the prefrontal cortex, which handles reasoning and regulation. Self-compassion forms another cornerstone of acceptance practice. Many overthinkers are harsh self-critics, which intensifies thought spirals. When difficult thoughts arise, try speaking to yourself as you would to a good friend, with kindness and understanding. Dr. Kristen Neff's research demonstrates that self-compassion significantly reduces anxiety and rumination while increasing psychological resilience. One participant in a mindfulness-based stress reduction program described her experience with acceptance. "I used to think my anxious thoughts were a problem to solve. I'd spend hours analyzing why I felt worried and how to stop feeling that way. Now I just note anxiety is present and continue with my day. The anxiety often dissolves on its own when I stop fighting it." Writing exercises can strengthen acceptance muscles. Try the thought stream exercise. Set a timer for 5 minutes and write continuously whatever comes to mind without editing or judging. This practice helps you observe thoughts flowing naturally without attaching to them or needing to control them. Over time, this builds comfort with the full range of your thinking patterns. Remember that acceptance doesn't mean approving of every thought or acting on impulses. You can accept that you're having thoughts about quitting your job without immediately turning in your resignation. Acceptance simply means acknowledging the reality of your current experience instead of denying or fighting it. This subtle distinction makes all the difference in reducing overthinking. What might change in your life if you stopped fighting your thoughts and instead greeted them with curiosity and compassion, breaking the reaction chain? Decision fatigue affects everyone, but overthinkers experience it more intensely. Every thought that demands attention is essentially asking for a decision. Should I worry about this? How should I respond? By reducing the impulse to react to every thought, you preserve mental energy for truly important decisions. Research shows that judges give more lenient rulings early in the day when their decision-making resources are fresh, highlighting how mental depletion affects judgment quality. Developing what psychologists call response flexibility helps break the automatic reaction to thoughts. Rather than immediately jumping into problem-solving mode when a thought arises, pause and ask, does this require action right now? Often, the answer is no. This small gap between thought and response can prevent hours of unnecessary rumination. Practice creating this pause by setting a gentle timer to ring randomly throughout your day. When it sounds, notice your current thinking pattern and whether you're reacting automatically. Our minds evolved to treat thoughts as urgent survival information. In prehistoric environments, ignoring a worrying thought is that a predator could be fatal. Today, our brains still operate with this urgency bias, treating everyday concerns as life or death matters. Recognizing this evolutionary mismatch helps put thoughts in perspective. Your brain is doing its job by flagging potential issues, but you can decide which ones deserve immediate attention. Think of your thoughts as emails arriving in your mental inbox. Some require immediate action, many can wait, and most are spam that needs no response at all. Overthinkers tend to treat every mental email as urgent. By consciously sorting your thoughts this way, you can significantly reduce anxiety and improve focus on what truly matters. The CALM framework for managing overthinking. The CALM framework offers a practical approach to integrating mindfulness and acceptance into daily life to manage overthinking effectively. This system addresses both the immediate challenge of intrusive thoughts and the long-term development of mental resilience. Component 1. Conscious awareness. The foundation of the CALM framework begins with developing conscious awareness of your thought patterns. This involves regularly pausing throughout the day to notice what's happening in your mind without judgment. Think of this as installing a mental observer who can witness your thoughts rather than being swept away by them. Practicing conscious awareness means recognizing the early warning signs of overthinking, tension in your body, accelerated breathing, or circular thinking patterns. By catching these signs early, you can intervene before getting lost in a thought spiral. Start by setting 3 awareness alarms throughout your day as reminders to check in with your mental state. The relationship between conscious awareness and other components is crucial. It serves as the gateway to the entire framework. Without awareness, you can't effectively apply acceptance or a mindfulness response. Consider conscious awareness as the doorway through which all other practices must pass. Component 2. Acceptance without judgment. Once you've developed awareness of your thoughts, the next component involves accepting them without harsh self-criticism. This doesn't mean approving of every thought, but acknowledging their presence without adding layers of judgment. Acceptance involves recognizing that thoughts are mental events, not necessarily facts or reflections of your character. When troubling thoughts arise, practice saying, "This is just a thought my mind has produced," rather than identifying with it as truth. This subtle shift reduces the emotional charge of difficult thoughts. This component interacts with conscious awareness in a reinforcing loop. Greater awareness makes acceptance easier, while acceptance enhances your ability to maintain awareness without becoming entangled in thought content. Together, they create a stable platform for the remaining components. Component 3. Letting go of control. The third component addresses our tendency to overthink as an attempt to control outcomes. By recognizing which matters are within your influence and which aren't, you can redirect energy from futile control attempts toward constructive action. Letting go involves distinguishing between productive problem solving and unproductive rumination. Ask yourself, is this thought helping me solve a real problem, or am I just spinning my mental wheels? If it's the latter, practice consciously releasing the thought through visualization or verbal cues like "not useful right now." This component dynamically interacts with acceptance. When you truly accept thoughts without judgment, letting go happens more naturally. Conversely, letting go of control reinforces acceptance by demonstrating that you don't need to eliminate or fix every thought that arises. Component 4. Mindful response. The final component focuses on responding thoughtfully rather than reacting automatically to mental content. This involves creating space between stimulus, a thought, and response, your action, through mindful awareness. Mindful response means asking, "What's the wisest action here?" rather than immediately acting on thought-generated impulses. Sometimes, the wisest response is no action at all, just allowing the thought to exist without feeding it with attention or reaction. This component represents the practical application of the previous 3 elements. The awareness, acceptance, and letting go create conditions for a mindful response to emerge. Together, they form a comprehensive system for managing overthinking effectively. Framework dynamics. The CALM framework operates as an integrated system rather than a linear process. Each component supports and enhances the others, creating positive feedback loops that strengthen your overthinking management skills over time. Under stress conditions, you may cycle through these components multiple times, perhaps needing to return to conscious awareness after being pulled into reaction, then reestablishing acceptance before attempting to let go again. This flexibility allows the framework to adapt to various thought patterns and situations. The framework achieves equilibrium when all 4 components operate in balance. When this happens, thoughts flow through your awareness without causing distress or triggering excessive analysis. This balanced state doesn't mean the absence of thoughts, but a changed relationship with them. Practical application. To implement the CALM framework in daily life, begin with small, consistent practices, rather than attempting complete mastery immediately. Start with a 2-minute daily CALM check-in, where you deliberately practice each component in sequence. For persistent overthinking patterns, apply the framework to specific thought categories first, like work worries or relationship concerns, before expanding to all thought types. This targeted approach builds confidence in the system's effectiveness. The framework particularly shines in high-stress situations, where overthinking typically intensifies. By practicing during calmer periods, you build the neural pathways necessary to access these skills when you need them most, during mental storms. By integrating mindfulness techniques for present moment awareness, practicing acceptance without judgment, and developing the ability to respond rather than react, you create a powerful system for managing overthinking. These interconnected practices don't just address symptoms, but transform your fundamental relationship with thoughts, allowing you to navigate life's complexities with greater ease and clarity. The freedom of non-reaction. Learning to pause before reacting to thoughts creates space for wisdom to emerge. Viktor Frankl, neurologist and Holocaust survivor, expressed this perfectly. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. For overthinkers, expanding the space between thought and reaction represents true freedom from mental loops. When you stop reacting immediately to every thought, you conserve tremendous mental energy. Consider the analogy of driving a car. An inexperienced driver might constantly accelerate and brake sharply, wasting fuel and creating a jerky ride. An experienced driver maintains steady momentum, using the brakes only when necessary. Similarly, not reacting to every thought conserves psychological energy and creates a smoother mental journey. The practice of non-reaction becomes more accessible through regular mindfulness. Start with simple exercises like watching your thoughts during everyday activities. While washing dishes, notice how many thoughts arise without acting on them. This informal practice strengthens your ability to observe without reacting, which transfers to more challenging situations. Research at Harvard found that people spend nearly 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're doing. And this mind wandering correlates with unhappiness. Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction, suggests using mini moments of mindfulness throughout the day to build non-reactivity. When your phone rings, take one mindful breath before answering. When waiting in line, observe your surroundings instead of checking your phone. These small practices accumulate into significant changes in your relationship with thoughts. The combination of present moment awareness, accepting thoughts without judgment, and reducing impulsive reactions creates a powerful system for breaking free from overthinking, allowing clear decisions to emerge naturally from a calmer mind. As we've explored throughout this chapter, integrating mindfulness into your daily life isn't just a nice addition. It's a powerful antidote to overthinking. When you become fully present, you create space between yourself and your thoughts, breaking the automatic cycle of rumination that can consume your mental energy. The techniques we've discussed don't require hours of meditation or complete lifestyle overhauls. They simply ask you to pause, notice, and choose your response, rather than being dragged along by every thought that crosses your mind. This small shift from reactive to responsive can transform your relationship with thinking itself. Remember that acceptance doesn't mean resignation. When you accept thoughts without judgment, you're not giving up. You're actually taking back control. By acknowledging thoughts without automatically engaging with them, you diminish their power and free yourself from their grip. The present method, your daily mindfulness roadmap. Here's a practical approach to incorporate mindfulness into your daily routine, helping you manage overthinking effectively. P. Pause. Begin each day with 5 minutes of mindful breathing. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. Count each inhale and exhale to anchor yourself to the present moment. Time, 5 minutes each morning. R. Recognize. When thoughts arise, simply notice them without judgment. Label them gently: planning thought, worry thought, or memory. This creates distance between you and the content of your thinking. Time. Practice throughout the day. E. Experience. Fully engage with your senses during routine activities. In eating, notice flavors and textures. When walking, feel each step connecting with the ground. Choose 2 to 3 daily activities for this focused attention. Time, 1 to 2 minutes per activity. S. Set intentions. Before meetings or challenging tasks, take 30 seconds to set a clear intention for how you want to show up. This primes your mind to stay focused rather than spiral into overthinking. Time, 30 seconds before key activities. E, evaluate without judgment. At midday, take a minute to check in with yourself. Notice any patterns of overthinking without criticism, simply observing with curiosity. Time, 1 minute daily. N, note progress. Keep a simple log of moments when you caught yourself overthinking and successfully applied mindfulness. Tracking even small wins reinforces the habit. Time, 2 minutes each evening. T, transition mindfully. End your day with a brief practice. Acknowledge 3 moments you practice mindfulness and how it affected your thinking patterns. This reinforces the neural pathways that support present moment awareness. Time, 3 minutes before bed. The beauty of this method lies in its flexibility. Start with just 1 or 2 elements that resonate most with you, then gradually incorporate others. You might find that certain techniques work better in specific situations. Embrace this personalization. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored how overthinking stems from deeply ingrained mental habits. We've learned how to recognize our thought patterns, challenge distorted thinking, implement practical strategies to break the cycle, and now how to cultivate mindfulness as a foundation for lasting change. The journey from overthinking to mental clarity isn't about eliminating thoughts. It's about transforming your relationship with them. When you combine the cognitive restructuring techniques from earlier chapters with the mindfulness practices we've just explored, you create a powerful toolkit for reclaiming your mental space. Your mind will still generate thousands of thoughts daily. That's what minds do. But you're no longer obligated to treat each one as urgent, important, or true. This shift alone can release you from the exhausting cycle of overthinking that once felt inescapable. As you move forward, be patient with yourself. Old thought patterns may resurface, especially during stress or fatigue. When this happens, it's not a failure. It's simply an opportunity to practice the skills you've learned. Each time you notice overthinking and choose a different response, you're strengthening new neural pathways and weakening old ones. Remember that the goal isn't perfect thinking, but greater freedom, the ability to use your mind as the powerful tool it is, rather than being used by it. With consistent practice of the techniques throughout this audiobook, you'll find yourself spending less time caught in mental loops and more time fully engaged in the life you want to live. Your thoughts will always be with you, but they no longer need to control you. That realization isn't just the end of overthinking, it's the beginning of a more intentional, focused, and peaceful way of living. Final words. You've made it. Throughout this journey, you have explored the depths of overthinking, examined its tangled roots, and discovered powerful tools to transform your thought patterns. Like a traveler who's been carrying a heavy backpack for too long, you now have permission to set that burden down and walk with a lighter step. The path from overthinking to mental clarity isn't a straight line. It's more like tending a garden. Some days, weeds of worry will sprout unexpectedly. Other days, you'll see beautiful growth from the seeds of change you've planted. What matters most isn't perfection, but persistence in applying the CBT-based techniques you've learned. Remember when we first talked about recognizing your overthinking patterns? That awareness alone has likely already created shifts in how you experience your thoughts. By now, you understand that thoughts are not facts. They're mental events that come and go like clouds across the sky of your consciousness. This fundamental insight changes everything. The techniques we've explored, from thought records to behavioral experiments, from mindfulness practices to cognitive restructuring, form a comprehensive toolkit for dismantling overthinking. These aren't just theoretical concepts, but practical skills that strengthen with regular use. Each time you catch yourself spiraling and apply these tools, you're literally rewiring neural pathways in your brain, creating new habits of mind that serve you better. Many listeners have shared how these methods transformed not just their thinking, but their entire lives. Take Maya, who used to spend hours agonizing over work emails, imagining catastrophic outcomes from the smallest phrasing choices. After practicing thought challenging for several weeks, she now completes her communications efficiently and confidently. And consider James, whose relationship anxieties kept him awake night after night until he implemented the worry scheduling technique and reclaimed his sleep. You too can experience these transformations. Start small, perhaps by choosing just one technique from this audiobook that resonated most strongly with you. Practice it daily for 2 weeks before adding another. Consistency matters more than perfection. If you notice yourself slipping back into old patterns, respond with self-compassion rather than criticism. Remember that setbacks are not failures, but opportunities to practice your new skills. I want to acknowledge that some overthinking patterns may be deeply entrenched, particularly if they're connected to trauma or persistent mental health challenges. While the approaches in this audiobook have helped countless people, some listeners may benefit from additional support through therapy or other professional guidance. There's wisdom and courage in seeking help when needed. As you move forward, I encourage you to become a scientist of your own mind. Notice what triggers your overthinking, which techniques help most, and how your relationship with your thoughts evolves over time. Keep a simple journey to track your progress, not to judge yourself, but to celebrate your growth and gather insights about your unique thought patterns. The real power of this work lies not just in reducing anxiety or improving focus, though these are wonderful benefits, but in reclaiming your agency. Overthinking makes us passive, trapped in mental loops that drain our energy and dim our joy. Breaking these cycles returns us to active participation in our lives. When thoughts no longer control you, you're free to choose where to direct your precious attention. Imagine waking up 6 months from now, your mind quieter, your decisions clearer, your energy reclaimed from the exhausting cycle of rumination. This future is entirely possible. It begins with the next thought you notice, the next time you choose a new response. Your journey to mental freedom isn't ending with the conclusion of this audiobook. It's just beginning. Trust yourself. You have everything you need to transform your relationship with thinking. One thought at a time, one day at a time. You're building a mind that serves rather than sabotages your well-being. I believe in your capacity to change, to grow, and to thrive beyond the limitations that overthinking once imposed. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl.
We appreciate you tuning in to one of our captivating audiobooks. For more immersive experiences, here is another audiobook we're certain you'll enjoy. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video, sharing what you loved about this audiobook in the comments section below, and subscribing for more captivating audiobooks like this. Thanks for being a part of our audiobook community.